Hey, this is Ryan Jones from Serverless Guru, and to continue where we left off in the last video, I want to continue going through the course outline. So just to look at this, after we get set up ready, you should have an AWS account. You should be able to view the different processes, like how to search for services, and also look at the build section, so you can look at managing your cost. We're also going to go into an explanation of what serverless means, and this is a common buzzword. There's lots of semantics, and people fighting about like what this actually means. Google calls it something different. Amazon calls it something different. Based on the product that people make, they call it something different because they want to associate the word serverless with their product because it's a very hot trending term. So, and then we'll go into breakdown of services. So this section we're going to pretty much cover what is API Gateway, what is Lambda, what is CloudWatch, what is DynamoDB. Each one of those will be a separate video. We'll kind of show the console, give a high-level overview about what it does. And then we'll move into an introduction to Lambda. So Lambda will go into things like runtime, memory, how to basically create a basic Lambda function, how to test a Lambda function, all that stuff inside the console. And then we'll move into CloudWatch. So CloudWatch is a monitoring tool by Amazon Web Services, and we'll show how to use CloudWatch to basically see if our Lambda functions are working properly and if there's any errors. And then once we're done with that, we'll move into intro to API Gateway. So API Gateway is for the REST APIs, and that's what we'll be using to do things like our full CRUD functionality, like create, read, update, delete. And then we'll move into DynamoDB. So DynamoDB is the NoSQL solution from AWS, which allows us to store data and communicate things in a stateful way across our Lambda function invocations. So typical NoSQL database, there's a lot of differences, and we'll cover some of those. If you're coming from a MongoDB background or Firestore or any other CouchDB, there's going to be some differences with DynamoDB. It's not as forward as those ones, with collections and documents, but we'll get into that. And then we'll also go into creating the CRUD API. So we'll do the CRUD Lambdas first. So the first one we're going to cover is the create user Lambda. So this one's going to be about how to basically create a user, store it in DynamoDB, and then we'll move into setting up a local project. So this would be creating our folders, all that stuff locally, so we can actually zip this stuff up, upload it to AWS in more automated fashion. So no longer being in the console past this point, we'll be doing everything locally. And then the get user Lambda, this will be similar to create user. We're going to be able to fetch user data from DynamoDB. And then we'll have an update user, that's the U in CRUD. We'll be able to update the user and things like change the name, all different stuff like that. Delete user, this will be for deleting things from the database. So this will be the last section of our CRUD API. And then finally, we'll review what we built. So we'll think about like, what was the purpose of this? What did we accomplish? Where can we take it from here? And then finally, after we're done with that, we'll dive into the serverless framework. So up to this point, at this point, we hadn't actually used the serverless framework to do automation. But past this point, we're going to be using the serverless framework to add an automation factor in, which is going to speed everything up. And the goal here is to show you kind of both halves, right? Like one half of how you can do it manually, and it can be kind of brutal and brittle as well. And then also how to do it in an automated way where you can kind of speed up your development and make things a lot easier. So once we get done with the serverless details, we'll jump into actually installing it onto our machine, and then we'll start implementing it. So we'll add all of our cloud functions in there, and then we'll show how to tear stuff down. We'll talk about some plugins, and then we'll review everything about the serverless framework from there. Once that's done, we'll look into building the entire REST API with serverless. So that would be Lambdas, DynamoDB table, API gateway, all the permissions. We'll look at setup, and then we'll go into the Lambda functions to understand like more very deep dive topics on Lambda. And then we'll move into API gateway, and then into DynamoDB, and then cover environment variables, and finally additional Lambda stuff. Finally, we'll look at what we did in that section, and we'll move into building a front end for the API. So this would be, what is beneficial, why are we using it? We'll look at setup, so installing like a text editor, doing all this stuff locally to create a front end, and then also, through this process, we'll look at creating like a form. which connects back to our API so we can actually communicate to our database and have that back and forth communication. And then we'll look at adding a signup page. That's where we'll kind of get into Cognito, start doing some authentication. And at this point, we're going to be looking at doing a full, like, modern web application from authentication to the backend, to the front end, to the supporting automation, all of it. And then we'll look at a profile page. So this would be, loading things like, for instance, we're going to look at using AWS S3 for our storage. And all that stuff will be worked into the front end and connected to our back end. And then we'll look at some stuff about like deploying a single Lambda function or using serverless syntax, using external files for sensitive information, using plugins for adding more stacks. And finally, we'll look at where we're at and what you could potentially do after this. So after this whole course is done, you should be able to create a full stack application with authentication, image storage, a front end, a back end, all automated, and we'll probably even look at doing a CI/CD pipeline as well. So kind of pretty much packaging up everything that I've learned into a course and then giving it to you. So I hope you're excited, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.